The next video in our series about routers, we are going to talk about router bits, feeds, and speeds. I want to go over the variable speed on your router, which was one of the biggest questions I had. I want to talk about the feed speed, the amount of pressure you're putting on your router when you're cutting something. And I want to talk about different types of bits in depth. I covered that briefly in my router basics, tips and tricks, and buying advice video, which will be linked right here. But I want to get more in depth and talk about different spirals, upcut, downcut, and different types of bits and what they do and what I think are the most useful. So let's start by talking about the speed of your variable speed router. Most routers today have variable speed, and most of them will have numbers on them like this one from 1 to 6. Now, one of the biggest questions I get is, what speed do I run my router bit? Well, there are some simple rules to this, but first I want to explain why. So I want you to look at the inside circles here. We have small, medium, and large. Now, let's say that you could only walk one speed. Let's say that was a mile per hour. It would take you less time to get around the outside of this circle than it would this one, and this one would be less time than this one. And what that means is when your router is spinning at a certain speed, let's say 1 mile an hour, the inside of the bit is going to be going 1 mile an hour while the outside is going, let's say, 2 miles an hour. I know that's not the right math, but that's just an example. So how do you know what to do? Well, first of all, you want to look at the manual for your router. All of those are available online. You can download it as a PDF. It will assign values to those numbers on your router. It may be different for each brand, but for me, the number 6 on my DeWalt router is 24,000 RPMs. The number 5 is 21,000 RPMs. The number 4 is 18,000 RPMs, 3 is 14,000, 2 is 12,000, and 1 is 18,000. So how does that translate to bits? Well, router bits under 1 inch, like these here, you can run up to 24,000. If you're having problems with burning, you can slow down your router or adjust the speed at which you're pushing. We will talk about that in a second. Bits like these, which are 1.5 inches wide, you're gonna want to run at 18,000 RPMs. So under 1 inch, full speed, 1 to 2 inches, 18,000 RPMs. And then up here, 2 to 2.5 inches, you're gonna wanna run at 16,000 RPMs. And 3 inches and above, you're gonna want to run below 12,000 RPMs. And you could make adjustments depending on the type of cut you're getting. So that's some basic rules. You're gonna wanna make adjustments, but honestly, most bits that I own are under 1 inch, so I don't really worry about it. When I'm doing big roundovers like this, sometimes I'll still run it at full speed and just take smaller passes. Like we talked about in our previous video, you never really want to take a bigger pass than half the diameter of the shank of your bit. So with this bit, I would probably take 3 1/4 inch passes, and if I was getting a good finish, I might not adjust my router, but for this one, for example, when I'm flattening slabs with this, I absolutely lower the speed of my router because it just makes such a difference. And you have to push a little bit slower, but when you're moving this big of a bit and removing that much material, you really want to slow down to avoid getting a bad finish or burning. Let's talk about how fast you're going to push your router. All right, so here I've put a 1/4 inch upcut bit in my router, and I'm going to show you the speed at which you want to push. I think if I had to assign a value to it, it would maybe be 1/4 inch a second. So it's very slow and it's very light pressure. You don't want to feel like you're really shoving your router. You want to feel like your bit is cutting and you're moving at the speed at which it allows you to move. What you want to listen for is high-pitched screeching or your router jumping as you cut. It means you're probably pushing either too hard or you're taking too big of a cut. Remember, refer to that don't take a pass bigger than half the diameter of your shank rule. And if you have your speed set correctly, you shouldn't be getting those kind of sounds. So I'm gonna set up my router here and show you what it sounds like when you're getting a good cut and when you're getting a bad cut where you're pushing too hard. Okay, so I'm gonna take my first pass here. I'm taking almost a 1/2 inch pass, and you're gonna hear the sounds, the screeching. It'll be alternating sounds. You want just a consistent buzzing, cutting sound. I don't know how to say it better than that, but I think you'll hear here when we get the screeching and jumping that happens when you do too much of a cut. Okay, so you heard all the screeching that was going on, and that was just too big of a pass, and I was pushing too hard. Now, this is what it should sound like when you are making a correct pass. So you can tell there was a huge difference in sound there, and there was 2 problems. One was we were pushing way too fast, and also we were taking too deep of a cut. You can see this black line here. This was our first cut, and this was our second. So you should get a nice consistent sound without screeching and squealing. If you're going too slow, you may get burning and you'd want to adjust from there. But you want to be pushing as fast as your router will allow without any resistance. That's feeds and speeds. Now let's talk about in-depth different types of router bits. As you can see, there are so many different types of router bits. In fact, I built this cabinet a couple months ago, which was sponsored by Bits and Bits, my favorite place to buy router bits. There's a discount code down below. And I have free plans for these whole layouts. If you want to build something like this, that video is linked right here in the corner. But don't let this intimidate you. There's really only a few types of router bits. The first ones I want to talk about are straight bits. Straight bits come in a variety of diameters. You can get them all the way down to a 1/16 of an inch up to, I believe, inch and a half, something like that. There's spiral bits like this one here, compression bits. So this cuts up and down, and straight bits. Now this is from like a garbage Chinese set I got. And these dull and break really fast, and I hate the straight cutters because you get tons of tear out and everything like that. They are a lot cheaper, but I much prefer spiral bits for a couple reasons. One, they clear chips out of the cut. One of the causes of burning when you're cutting a dado or a groove is that you get heat buildup, and if sawdust is staying in your groove, your router bit is not only working to cut the material, but it's working against all that sawdust that is compacted in there, which is why bits come in spirals. One, you get a sideways cut, so it's like a shearing cut. You get a much better finish, and it clears chips, and it can clear chips up or down. This is a compression bit. A compression bit has an up cutter and a down cutter. You can see this is a down cut, and this is an up cut. And what that's going to do, one, besides clearing chips, is a down cut is going to give you a better finish on the top of your board. As you can see, a down cut is going to force sawdust and the cut going down. This is great when you're doing through cuts or really big grooves and dados because the top of your board isn't going to get that fuzz that you can get with a router bit. An up cut bit is great for, let's say, shallower passes where you're not going all the way through because it's going to bring chips up. However, if you are going through, it's going to give you a better finish on the bottom of the board. Now you can see this is the same size bit, but one cuts up and one cuts down. This is the down cut bit. As you can see, the bit would be spinning this direction, and it's going to force chips down and give you a better finish on top. This is an up cut bit, which means it's going to scoop chips up, clearing them out of your cut, keeping your cut cooler, but you may get that fuzz on the top of your cut. Like I said, you can get a variety of sizes. I usually only buy 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch because those are multiples of the types of cuts that I usually want to make. And anything bigger than that, to me, you would have to take such shallow passes that it would take just as long to get a cut in the width that you want. These tend to work best for me. Not saying you shouldn't get bigger, but getting a good compression bit for really big cuts and a couple good 1/4 inch spiral bits, I think can do 98% of anything you're trying to do with a router as far as creating a square groove. The next type of bit I want to talk about are bearing bits. Now these come in 3 different types. Bearings on the bottom of the bit, bearings on the top of the bit, or bearings in both locations. Now these are my favorite bits. I've talked about these a million times in my router videos. Up and down cutter, bearing on both sides, most versatile bit with the cleanest cut, no tear out ever. Love these things. These are really cool, these small ones with the top bearings. I use these a lot when I'm just trying to get a shallow groove for something, like if I've created a template for our router lift, for example, for the router table we're building that should be coming out very soon. These are great. I've also seen Mike Farrington use these to clean out for the tails, for the pins on dovetails. He has a really cool technique for cleaning out waste with these that's really neat. These are great bits as well. This is my tiny corner bit, so when I need to get into really small corners, this is great. And these are great because they have a really big cutter, so if I need to cut along a very tall piece, these are wonderful. These are my most used bits, I would say, besides roundovers, which we'll talk in a minute, but typically I use these about every project for one thing or another. So let's talk about roundovers and edge profiling bits. Now, these are the other types of bearing bits, which again follow an edge, but these are for edge profiling in one type or another. Now, obviously, my most commonly used ones here are my 1/8 inch and 1/4 inch roundover, as well as a chamfer bit, but I do use these all. These are a series of roundover bits going from, I believe it's 1 inch, 3/4, 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, 1/8 inch. And these are great for a variety of applications, including you could make your own dowels in a router table by running the piece over it 4 times, and you can create a circle if you don't have a lathe. These are chamfer bits for creating a 45-degree corner. Great edge profile, really makes a project look really cool. And then this is a rabbiting bit that has different bearings, so you can get different size rabbets depending on the bearing. And this is a bit, I don't use it very often, but when you need it, it comes in really handy. And this is sort of a specialty bearing bit. This is called a rails and stiles bit. This is for making raised panel doors in a cabinet. And you can see these bits perfectly match each other. It's the negative and positive of each other for creating the pieces of a door in a cabinet. So edge bearing bits and flush trim bits are my most used bits, followed by straight bits. And then I have some very specialty bits that I want to talk about that I use occasionally, but are very cool and certainly come in handy. Okay, so here's some of my more specialty bits. I'll go over them kind of quickly because these may not be something a lot of you would use. These are tapered ball nose bits and lettering bits for the CNC. So if you're doing some engraving, these are great. This is like a 60-degree for very fine lettering, and these would be for doing fine raised 3D detail. This is a bowl bit. Has a rounded edge, you can see. So when you have an inside curve, you can create a bowl. This is a keyhole bit. This would be like the keyholes you see in the back of picture frames. So it will create a recess for a nail or a screw underneath while cutting the slot up above so that you can hang a picture on the wall. This is a slab flattening or spoils board bit. In the CNC, you would use this to flatten your spoils board, or you could set up a router jig to flatten a slab. These are a little less obscure, but they're great bits. These are dovetail bits for creating sliding dovetails on the router table or with your handheld router. This is a ball nose bit. You could create a rounded groove like the handle for a cutting board, or creating shapes on the CNC. This would obviously offer a lot less detail. Now, these are my most obscure bits, really cool. You've seen me use this one in actually the router cabinet build. This is a glass drag bit. In fact, all 3 of these bits, you would operate your spindle at 0 RPM, so these would not be spinning. This is a glass drag bit. It has a diamond in the tip for dragging on glass, acrylic, and it's spring loaded, so you can set the depth at which it scratches the glass, and it's really cool. I made my logo in the router bit cabinet video, as well as Bits logo, and it just came out so neat. This is a vinyl drag bit. This is for cutting leather, cloth, vinyl on your CNC. It's really cool. It's got a spinning little blade in there. It's a carbide blade, and it's really cool for cutting cloth. And this one is really funny. This is for holding a Sharpie. So this is a pen plotter tool. It's also spring loaded, and you could use it to draw on your CNC with a Sharpie on any material that you want, maybe making signs that look like they're handmade, that kind of thing. So these are some of my more obscure bits, but again, I've used all of these. They're really cool, and I kind of am starting to realize now I may have a router bit problem. So let me know down in the comments what you think. Let me know if you have any more questions and things you'd like me to cover in our router bit series. If you'd like to support the channel, please head over to the Katz-Moses store, pick up a stop block, dovetail jig, or a t-shirt. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Stay safe in the shop and have a wonderful day.